Good morning, Chris and Sarah.
Listen, good to see you. You make the point in this that these kind of cases, they don't just harm victims, they also damage confidence in policing. When people hear that this morning, there are 24 cases currently being investigated where it's alleged officers abuse their positions for sexual purposes. You know that's going to cause an awful lot of concern.
Absolutely, but I think it's important right at the start to say that the vast majority of police officers and staff go into work every day, often in very challenging circumstances, to uphold their professional standards and their code of ethics. So while those numbers of cases are concerning and abuse of position for sexual purpose is an awful offence and awful corruption, I think it's important to say they are in the context of a wider number of abusive position allegations that need to be investigated and are investigated by the Police Ombudsman's Office.
And just to focus specifically on this issue to start with, you say that the Ombudsman identified 7 alleged victims of abuse of position for a sexual purpose that were known to the police but had not been referred to the Ombudsman. How does that happen?
Well, it happens because there might be lack of clarity about when a referral needs to take place, and I'm pleased that the police service have taken steps to rectify that, and 6 of those 7 cases are under investigation by the Police Ombudsman's Office. So the police have taken some action in response to that. But the point that you made at the start around vulnerable victims coming forward and public confidence, it's absolutely critical that the public have confidence when the Police Ombudsman's Office are investigating any allegations of abusive position. But it's equally important that the police service are confident about those investigations and that they work closely with the Police Ombudsman's Office and the recommendations that they make and the policy recommendations that they make as well, and making sure that they're taken forward to improve policing.
But that does seem remarkable. Just to be clear, these are cases where the police were aware of an allegation of somebody using their position to abuse that for the purposes of some kind of sexual purpose, and it was not referred to the Ombudsman.
Yes, and that's what, as I say, and a recommendation in the report emphasises that about the need for professional standards and for the Police Ombudsman's Office to work together to make sure there is absolute clarity on and training for police officers and understanding when a referral is necessary.
Is part of the problem here as well that the Ombudsman doesn't seem to have a definite definition for abusive position in place at the moment?
One of the key recommendations that I've made in this report is that the Police Ombudsman's Office develops a definition of abusive position and a strategy to address that. And that's really important in analysing those cases, identifying, analysing, monitoring trends, monitoring the impact of recommendations and where they actually do improve policing and the recommendations that they make to the PSNI.
We are very aware and have discussed before that there has been an issue with the Ombudsman and staffing, and that's been one of the big issues. And you make a point that there are vacancies at investigating officer level, but it seems remarkable how long it is taking to investigate some of these complaints. You say that it took an average of 510 calendar days. Was that something like 17 months to investigate some cases, investigate malpractice complaint cases, including abuse of position for sexual purpose, and submit a case to the PPS? How is it taking so long?
Well, we know that delay in the criminal justice system and investigations is an issue. We know that particularly where vulnerable victims are involved, it can be difficult to achieve best evidence. We also know that where forensics are needed to analyse mobile devices, iPads, laptops, that this can take a long time. I think what's really important as noted in the report, that there are really robust, good internal quality assurance processes in place, that there's supervision, that the progress of cases is monitored, but there's no doubt about it, these cases take a very long time, and it's not only difficult for victims, it's difficult for the officers or staff who are under investigation as well. So once the Police Ombudsman has completed their investigation, whether it's recommending a prosecution, that a criminal offence has occurred, the Public Prosecution Service have to consider whether they will prosecute a case or whether they will make a no prosecution decision. And then if they decide they're not going to prosecute, then that can mean a further report going to the PSNI with a recommendation potentially for misconduct, performance management, or either a misconduct meeting or hearing. So it is a lengthy process, and it's very difficult for victims, and it's difficult for the people that may be under investigation.
Yeah, but there must be something going wrong here, though, when you take a look at the fact that it even takes over a year on average for a no prosecution recommendation to be made. And whether it goes to prosecution or not, there are very many cases where police officers are actually sitting on pay, and they are getting paid while they are not working. We already know the real concerns that the police have about the numbers of staff that they have, and there will be a question about why public money is going there, particularly if you have an officer facing the potential of serious charges.
Absolutely, and we know, as we say, delay is an issue in investigation, but what is important is that it's a high quality, impartial and effective investigation. I think the issue is where it's unnecessary delay, that there's a grip on the progress of investigations and they're taken forward as soon as they can. But yes, there's no doubt about it, and the report makes recommendations around this, that where steps could be taken, that in the absence of any action being able to occur, that if there is a criminal investigation and a case pending in the courts, that takes a very long period of time, and then if action can be taken, a legislative change is needed to the Police Act and potentially police regulations to enable the PSNI to take some action before and in the event of a criminal conviction.
And just briefly on that, Jaqui, I mean, you mentioned there that you want new legislation, essentially. You heard the Justice Minister maybe on the programme a little earlier saying that she doesn't believe there's a time to do it in this mandate. That means delays. You might be asking for this legislation, but she seems to be indicating they don't have the time to do it at the moment, and that means potentially delays in that as well.
Well, that's prioritising legislation and what meets this mandate and the next mandate. And
but does that mean that these kind of issues are not going to be addressed?
Well, I think taking action in advance of any criminal conviction, I think there are a number of processes and discussions that need to take place with the PSNI about what can be done without that legislation. But what is really important is that when legislation is put in place, that it's highly effective and it's fair to those who are under investigation, and it's fair to victims and witnesses and to the PSNI, and that they're carrying people on their workforce and paying them full time, and that is a real issue for public confidence, as we know. But it's also a draw on resources for the police, on police officers or staff that they can't deploy where they need them.
Jaqui, very good to speak to you, and thanks as always for coming in. We really appreciate it. Jaqui Durkin, who's the Chief Inspector of Criminal Justice Inspection in Northern Ireland.